Shivam Babaji,
Shivoham.
thank you for joining us and thank you for the honor of taking us through this journey of prenatal education. And even though we have a very short time window, I'm sure that you'll be able to enlighten all the listeners and viewers who are so eagerly awaiting what is the actual view of the ancient traditions from the Bharatiya Parampara, as we call it, and the Indian knowledge systems have sort of sustained through the centuries, through the yugas, as we may actually define it. I'd like to give so much about your introduction, but I think that's all going to be a very pale and a faint reflection of truly how deeply you've been with the journey of prenatal education and led so many of us through this part. And I'm so humbled to have been your student as well. I know that I've met you 3 to 4 years back before the lockdown when we had this conference in India organized by APA. And I was truly wanting to study, which I still haven't gotten hold of, is the book that you've written on the Abhimanyu effect. And Babaji, please do enlighten us. What and how should we look at prenatal education through the lens of Hindutva, Hinduism, Sanatan Dharma, whatever the terms we may use? And I open the field to you.
Thank you, Ma. Thank you so much. It's equally an honor for me to participate in this session with you and the rest of the people who will be eventually listening to this. To begin with what are ancient civilizations and what have they done for the world of pre and perinatal education? I think in a sense, what we see in today's geographical terms as India becomes a reference point. But then India as a reference point is not just in terms of mere geography, it's got a much more nuanced presence. Why nuanced? First and foremost, it's amongst the only surviving ancient civilization, if I can call it that. You've seen the likes of the Roman civilization, the Babylonians, the Greek, and so on and so forth, Mayans, Incans, all of that included. But then you see that this is a civilization and a culture which has survived and preserved itself. In fact, there are many things which go back to thousands of years which are practiced in the same way even today, including the fact that there are multiplicities of languages, dialects, etc., which is the foundational thing of this place, which is diversity and unity, which go together. And in the midst of all of this emerges this grand vision of everything. Me, myself, the universe, the world, which we put into this beautiful term called spirituality. It gives you a comprehensive perspective of what life is all about. So in the context of defining this, we refer to this ancient paradigm itself as Bharata, and what Bharata had and what it carries in perpetuity is what is called as Sanatana. Sanatana, by its very definition, is something which is eternal. Now, if it is eternal, what is this Sanatana? And while Hinduism is loosely referred to as a religion, is Hinduism the same as Sanatana, or is Sanatana something different? Now, the way religions are described, we all know this, or they get paraphrased as so-and-so religion with so-and-so founder or so-and-so book and so-and-so things. You don't find those typical things within the context of Hinduism itself. And if you move into the territory of Sanatana, it becomes much more wider. The best way of describing what Sanatana could be, because it's only capable of a description, it's not a definition. It is, of course, a way of life and civilizationally and culturally carried across millennia. Okay, the concept of time itself, we'll come to that in some time, hopefully, is much larger than what we know of from every other paradigm. So that continuity, which represents eternity, is what we call as Sanatana. And it's a grand set of principles. It's very different from other religions simply because it's not run by a book or a set of diktats. It's a set of principles which are woven into the way of life. It acts as a guide and as a set of prescriptions, not as mandatory things which you need to do in life, but a set of things which you can adopt. And most people having adopted have found it to be very, very meaningful. And the fact that it brings certain fundamentals which are even modern, so to say, like you have this concept of eternity and universality of energy, which is being more and more pronounced and observed in the world today. So the concept of energy being the over dominant or the only prevalent uh, thing of importance for creation, and how energy manifests, how it operates, etc., are essential aspects of what Sanatana is. And how this energy operates becomes even more fascinating. So the concept of continuity, how does this concept of continuity get woven into this thing called energy, and how does this singular energy appear in so many forms, so many ways and means of perception, because a lot of it is also perceived. So you have entropies, you have fractalizations, you have a lot of it. And last but not the least of the principles is, how does this continue and how does this operate? So while one could be in terms of its presence itself, the very fact that there is creation and there is sustenance and there is transformation and everything seems to be interconnected is also founded on a set of principles. So we get back to the roots of what we could gain from this body of, what should I call it, knowledge at the minimum, from this body of knowledge for ourselves to say that we can get a standard reference or a great reference point for understanding everything. And more particularly, when we get to prenatal, perinatal education, it has a lot in store for us from that perspective as well. So that's what I would call as the beginning. And I look forward to what you would like me to carry this with now.
Babaji, now that we've kind of looked at the umbrella under which, that may define the lens or the perspective into how do we view prenatal education from the Indian perspective, what are the sources that have, continued through the yugas for us through the centuries? And yeah, as you were saying, we'll get into the concept of time to understand how the traditions have sustained over, in the continuum of time space confluences.
Yes, Ma, it's very important because we need to appreciate these sources from multiple perspectives. The first and foremost is, who are the people who made this? Okay, that's the, because most religions have a founder and a set of books or reference points. So is there something similar both in Sanatana, Hinduism? I'm using these two terms interchangeably for now. And how does this, how does the emergence of knowledge with respect to perinatal education happen? We need to understand that if there are entities who actually figured this out, why I say figured it out is because the people who got it from the most pristine source, which is probably the universe itself. So the people who divined this knowledge were people who are called loosely in English as sages, but in the context of Bharata and Sanatana, they're called rishis. Rishis, in a sense, they're progenitors. Apart from that, they're the torchbearers of all knowledge and bringing it forward. And there are multiple of them. There's no singular one. And the fact that all of them coalesced and brought forth from different perspectives the same knowledge is an amazing and astounding thing. So you have the rishis of Bharata who divined the knowledge of the universe, virtually tuning into the frequencies of the universe. And they gave it out to mankind many, many years ago. Now, how many years ago is a good question. Again, we can answer that in the concept of time, but it's definitely many, many millennia. The fact that these sources have been preserved goes back to one astounding fact, which is that more than being written, they were carried forward in the oral tradition. So you had this being passed on, the knowledge, the codes, every bit of it being passed on over generations through the oral tradition, from a guru to the shishya, and so on and so forth, from one generation to the next. And it's got preserved till some point of time when there was a confluence where these were reduced into writing as well. And that itself is many millennia preceding us. So thousands of years ago, you have this knowledge getting written into a format and along with the script, etc., being put into text, some of which are lost, probably many of which are lost, but the lot which remain have been such tremendous sources of knowledge and wisdom for mankind that they exist even today. Now, in the broad categorization of where pre and perinatal education and the knowledge pertaining to that exists, it exists in all the bodies of knowledge. For instance, if you go to what is called as Vedas and Upanishads, which are supposed to be more pristine and the original, most original of all the scriptural knowledge available to us, you find mentions of those there. In fact, the most structured delivery of what pregnancy, preconception, and the rest of it is there in an Upanishad, which is also a very, very succinct and very pithy, so to say, because it's just one page, one A4 size page, I guess, is a scripture called Garbhopanishad. Now, it's an Upanishad, as I said. Garbha refers to the womb, and it's the Upanishad or something which is so sacred and full of sanctity that it brings forth the knowledge from the most universal of perspectives to what is usable by mankind, observable, relatable, all of it into one Upanishad called Garbhopanishad. So that is at the Upanishad or a Vedic level. Then you come down to acharana or practices. You'll find rishis like Sushruta, who has come up with lot. And today, Ayurveda is a very familiar term to a lot of people across the world. And Ayurveda, again, the progenitor of that is Sushruta in many ways, right? So Sushruta, who came out with Garbhini Paricharya, so many of these practices, it's all there as a part of our scriptures. Not to mention, Puranas, Itihasas, every one of them, be it in Garuda Puran, be it in Bhagavatam, be it in Mahabharata, every scripture gives you the reference point of what prenatal, perinatal point, prenatal, perinatal education could be, and which both in the prescriptive form, principles form, operational form, and executable form. Every format of what can be done and how it can be used is there in all the sources. But primarily, I tend to rely largely on the Garbhopanishad. And also, of course, the other scriptures get woven into it. But I see Garbhopanishad as a masterpiece in this entire set of offerings which we have.
Babaji, we've looked at how this whole cosmic, great body of wisdom has been brought to us through various aspects, as you mentioned, the Upanishads, the Vedic texts like Ayurveda as well, and through our practical knowledge systems, which have continued not only through oral traditions, but through living sort of customs as well. How women are treated during their pregnancy, how a woman is told to prepare before she wants to conceive a baby, how a couple is asked to go and take blessings from their Kula Devi or Devtas, and so many, it's innumerable, etc. How can we know when we're saying we're funneling it down, we're crystallizing it to today's practical day and age? The lens that we're particularly targeting at today is the prenatal imprints, the prenatal memories, the prenatal impressions, because that in itself is forming this spiritual blueprint for how a mother is transferring her feelings, her emotions, and her body of wisdom as well through her parampara, from that subtle realm to the physical. So I'll really open it out for you to expand it and maybe take us through in various stages so that, it's not only digestible for the audience who's not, like most of the people who are listening are from the Western audience, but also the modern young generation in India as well, who is completely conflicted in terms of what they're reading in Google or what their doctors are telling them or what they feel is coming to them from societal pressure versus what is true for us. So how do we filter it out? Firstly, how do we identify what it is? And also then how do we filter it out into saying, this is what the true value of this knowledge is and how I know that I need to stick to these principles?
A very important question, Ma.
Ji.
And we need to first establish the reliability, if I can use that term, to appreciate the value of what is there in these scriptures. First and foremost, these are probably the most ancient sources of knowledge for all of mankind. And they have been pre-existing the history we know. So I can very safely say that it stood the test of time. And the same knowledge has been carried forward, understood, practiced, and implemented over hundreds, thousands of years. Now, if something stands by itself as a body of knowledge over that period of time, you just cannot discard it. You cannot say that it's a write-off. That's typically the, within brackets, the scientific way to say that this is unscientific and therefore we refuse to accept it. But the fact that this stands by itself as a body of knowledge over millennia is one reference point or a significant noteworthy point. At a second level, you also see that you really have no effective retribution or a countering of this. You've never had somebody who's researched this and come back and told you this says this, whereas in reality it is this. So if you look at it as as what we call as tarka in our context, as a logical opposition, you've never really had logical opposition to this body of knowledge. It's existed and it continues to reign even today. But the icing on the cake, if I need to call it that, is the fact that while this body of knowledge has stood over centuries and millennia, it's the other body of knowledge which is catching up, what we call as the objective science, or the science which we know of as in the context of an input, output, a process and repeatability as being scientific. That has evolved significantly to gain a very different kind of appreciation of this body of knowledge, which has stood the test of time. So much so that many of the concepts of the modern quantum sciences and quantum physics which are coming about have found deep resonance in these texts. Because what stands as this body of knowledge from Bharata has been discovered or unveiled for a lot of people. I don't even want to take names, starting from Schrodinger or Max Planck through Oppenheimer. In fact, Oppenheimer was a recent movie, right, where people appreciated the movie for its value, but truly he too gave descriptions of what was there as something which he had studied and chanced upon in the course of his life from the portals of India. And you have very modern scientists like Tom Campbell, who's at NASA, and a whole lot of others who are affirming what is there in these scriptures to be the most observable phenomenon of the universe today. Observable in scientific terms. They might not be visible to the naked eye, but they are things which are getting revealed from the most modern and scientific perspective. So therefore, when you see quantum sciences, the concepts of non-locality, or all of these concepts which come in as essential components that a thing can exist simultaneously in many places at the same time. This is something which has been a part of our knowing and learning for years together. And now, coming back through hundreds of years of research, modern sciences have evolved to the level that you get a perspective that actually there's a lot in the scriptures of the East, and more particularly in Bharata, where you find these lofty concepts having been everyday stuff at some time in the past. And it's still preserved. So much for the value of that knowledge. But let's get down to prenatal, perinatal education. And again, looking at what great texts like Garbhopanishad of Sage Pipalada tell us? It starts off at a plane and getting directly into action by saying that, if there is energy in the universe, how do we categorize energy? Now, it's a science of the womb, and it starts off with an explosion, so to say, of energy and life and planes of energy. And what are the things which need to combine together, come together as material, as factors of the mind, from the environment. And it's for the first time that you have an appreciation that there is a transition in the course of these energies, changing entropies, getting fractalized into different forms, and finally arriving in the human form. And when was this knowledge there? This knowledge was there in the fold of mankind thousands of years ago. And suddenly, you notice that all the aspects which we call as stages of pregnancy and elements of what happens in each of the months, etc., they've been mentioned there. So now you have this body of knowledge, not just stating, but detailing to the T of what happens and how energy transformation happens. Now, there's one foundational premise, which is that there's no destruction of energy possible. So energy exists. It can only transform, alter. But there's this sense of continuity as well. Now, how do we resolve this? This is where we need to look at preconception pregnancy from a very different perspective than what most of the Western civilizations would have been encountering till now. It starts not now, it starts in what you may call as the past, if you want to call it that. Now, what is the past? If you look at life and time, time is a continuum. And within that continuum of time, do you view it as linear? Do you view it as circular? The first definition which you get from our scriptures is the fact that time is cyclical. Now, if time is cyclical, and therefore what the term used is Kala Chakra, that is, it's a circular rotation or a circular movement, perception of time. Birth cannot happen in isolation. It cannot happen from a vacuum. So where is birth happening from? So the materiality of it in terms of, the sperm and the egg coming together, etc., is a subsequent development. But in the energetic form, there's a lot which is preceding that. Now, this is largely in the realm of preconception, but the same narration continues in the course of pregnancy and, in fact, into infancy as well. So what you see is an appreciation of life arriving from not vacuum, but from a place where possibly there are some connections to the past. And therefore, what you thought was death may become a reference point as the starting point for a new beginning. Because it's a continuum, you'll have to look at it in a circular manner, and then you'll begin to appreciate that it gets into a very different kind of nuanced appreciation. So you have rebirth coming out of a continuity, and within that continuity, because there's no vacuum, what are the factors which are in play? Now, this perspective you will not get from any other source, typically from the scriptures of Bharata. Now, you'll get this appreciation that because it is energy and there's continuity, and there's no vacuum and there's no sudden happening of anything, there's a flow. So in that flow, you have this concept of what is loosely understood as action-reaction, but much more sophisticated as a concept is the concept of karma. Now you have karma, which is giving you a flow of patterns which are in continuity. So they're carrying traces of the past, mingling with the rest of the forces of the universe, and then regrouping once again in a sense of continuity to create a new life. This is how life comes into play. This is how life gets created. It's not a de novo creation ever. It is something of the past and something which is there in existence, and that is finding a redefinition once again. So it can only be a question of a redefinition or a re-coming into birth, not the first time. Now, this perspective you get when you appreciate the totality and the interconnectedness of the universe itself, which is where modern quantum sciences is moving to. So when you appreciate it from that perspective, you can see that past is connected to the present. What I did in the past maybe is connected, and what others did for me and what I did for them, and the entirety of it is what is going to influence my present, and my future is going to evolve or emerge from that. So this is the modern perspective of life itself, which is emerging from the quantum field. But at the same time, the scriptures of Bharata have been speaking about it for years together. Now, is there something more specific in that? Indeed. For what I have done, along with karma, there is a particular orientation for this flow. So it's not in random that it can happen, this can become that. No, there's a method to that. And that method gets defined through what is called as dharma. Dharma is, it's not rights and wrongs. It's the way energy gets channelized. Dhara iti dharma. So you get this perspective that this energy is not moving in random, nothing is unconnected, and that continuity happens through various channels. Primarily, while dharma is in operation, what I am coming in as a reborn person will be with what I brought from the past. And what I typically bring from the past is both the set of karmas and also my orientations. Orientations as in my vasanas, my tendencies, my preferences. The whole lot of them keep coming back and regrouping. It's not a linear thing. This is the problem, when we try to explain everything within a few minutes or a few words, you get this reality that there is continuity, not just in terms of the life which is coming in, but also the patterns and the energetic flow which was there in the past is coming back once again. So what happens to that memory then? This memory stays through the course of preconception, which is a few months before physical conception at the minimum. And after conception, the 9 months, every month, every week, we know that there's a lot which is happening from the medical perspective. But when you look at it from the spiritual perspective, the instant of birth, through every day thereafter, through the 3rd month, what happens, through the 7th month, what happens, through the 8th, 9th, defining moments at the time of birth. And suddenly, you have a lapse of memory. This life which was coming into play to be reborn is suddenly back in another dimension as what? As an entity who's completely afresh without the traces of memory in the conscious plane. Now, this is important. I don't have conscious memory, but in deeper layers of who I am, this memory is embedded. So therefore, this loss of memory is also a very important feature which we have to recall, because what we understand as that birth trauma, for instance, from a prenatal, perinatal perspective, to say that, there's a trauma at the time of birth. Indeed, there could be a traumatic experience for that baby with a large head to pass through that narrow birth canal. But then that loss of memory gets facilitated at that point of time. And it is a necessary component of coming into existence because I need to live a fresh life. So I go through a depressive phase, knowing fully well that I am in a much larger realm, but I'm going to take rebirth and I'm going to get into a very narrow realm and I'm going to play the game all over again. This depression, this fetal depression, as you can term it, is not something which is to be worried about. It is a necessary component of the birthing and the continuity of life itself. So once you get this perspective, you can see that there is a continuum of energy before birth. The changes which goes through, there's a morphing and transformation at a very rapid pace in the universal realm, finally gets into a physicality through the formation of the zygote and so on and so forth. And then at each instant changes getting reflected, and the same changes continue, same state continues for a significant period of time post-birth as well. So the first 2 years of life, which we call as infancy in today's parlance, so preconception, pregnancy, and infancy have a commonality because you're not in the conscious mind realm. You're in a different plane as an individual. You look like a human being, but you're not just a human being. You're a supra being. So that appreciation you get from the scriptures of Bharata. Okay, I'm sorry I've taken a longer time trying to get this in perspective, but I hope that this gives at least some elements of what people can think of, as a way to appreciate what the scripture is all about, or what this knowledge of Bharata is all about.
I must thank you for being able to put it in the words that you put it in such a short time, because it's absolutely an impossible task. So yeah, I think we're just maybe towards, I'm not sure where the time is at the moment. I can't see the time on my screen in terms of the recording, but we'll just go ahead with this. So
Yeah,
we've value and the greatness and the reality of the scriptures. We've looked at how through the mental construct of the time frame concept, we're able to distill this information and say, okay, here it is crystallizing into a physical element, but it's not just a physical element. And now I think the prenatal studies are really coming to appreciate the depth and the wisdom of Bharatiya knowledge systems, which has, as you've said, survived and sustained and only enriched us through the centuries and through the yugas. How can we bring this, Babaji, to the younger generation and even to the current trends where, parents think they just want to take some piece of information from the net or maybe whatever they may read, or even if they listen to the summit, oh, how can I then make my baby to be smart and strong? And that's like the $1 million question. But apart from that, I'd like to also take it further into, where does the parent start owning their responsibility and working through their own karmas and through their own subconscious patterns, and recognizing that here is what the child is reflecting back to me, and here is my chance to really correct what I may not have been able to do in my earlier stages of my life, in my younger age. And so to really see that continuum, that I've taken birth and this was my mental makeup or psychological way of dealing with situations and life, and now I'm being asked to look at it differently. And so, that continuum, as you said, we've also chosen our ancestral lineage, we've also chosen our Guru Parampara. So it's not just us, it's also how we've interacted with others in the past and how others have interacted with us. So just touching upon that in the parent-child dynamic.
I think we're pretty close to the closure itself. So let
I'll
me
leave it to
try
you
to
to
summarize this. Yes.
Thank you.
See, the most important appreciation which we can get from this entire conversation will be the fact that you begin to appreciate how imprints are being made and how they play that vital and pivotal role in the course of rest of life, apart from being relevant at the time of birth or around the time of birth. What you get to appreciate is that there is a different entity in play energetically through the pregnancy, preconception, and infancy stages. That is not in the conscious state. So how do I engage with it? How do I engage with it to create good imprints, within quotes, to fix things post my birth, right? Or maybe at a later point of time. Now, while that is a separate topic in itself, I can only state this in the realm of prenatal, perinatal education. What is really important is to appreciate that there is much beyond the sensory realm. What we are limited to and what we see and touch and feel is only one part of us. There's a larger dimension of us which is beyond this. Now, for lack of a better term, it's in Bharatiya scriptures, they're called Vijnanamaya components, loosely translated, and I repeat this, loosely translated as the subconscious. It's not the same subconscious as the back of the mind. No, it's not that. But you need to appreciate that that is the driving force for both creation, sustenance. Now, creation is creation of new life, sustenance as in running the course of life. So therefore, it covers not just the prenatal, perinatal parts which are very, very important, but the rest of it as well. So how do you work in these frequencies, if I can use that term? Yes, to operate in that field, in that arena, there are possibilities, and those possibilities are also emerging from the same source. So from Sanatana, from Bharatiya Parampara, you will get ways and means of engaging with those subtle realms through, for example, what you see behind me. Okay, these are yantras in their own right. So what are yantras? These are sacred patterns. They're energetic patterns which are put together in a particular shape. Similarly, you can get those patterns forming certain sounds and notations, which are called mantras. So you have sacred sounds and sacred patterns, and the way they combine and operate and in what regularity becomes the sacred sequence, which is called chandas. So the moment you put together these three, you get access to not just the sensorial, which is physically accessible, etc., but into deeper parts of everythingness, which includes the prenatal child, the mother in the course of pregnancy, the child in the course of infancy, you, me, everybody else. But this plays the most important defining role for the rest of life in the course of prenatal and perinatal life. So therefore, what is put as these patterns are also reduced into daily operational stuff. For example, Garbhini Paricharya. What is a pregnant woman supposed to observe in the course of pregnancy? This is, again, a treatise. You have prescriptions, what to eat, how to sleep, what position, what posture. Everything is given in the scriptures. So in summation, if I can say, that starting at all the elemental levels, from the most elemental level of how I am born, which is actually profound in itself, to what is the purpose of this life which I'm taking, and how this movement happens over time and space, and how this dynamic thing called life comes into existence, and what possibilities can get created. You have the entirety of it available with tools and techniques. This is the grand part. With tools and techniques to create possibilities, new possibilities for mankind. And I see that a whole lot of organizations, Prenatal Alliance by itself, then you have APA, you have BTNH, Birthing the New Humanity Movement, a whole lot of others which are there, which are all focusing on appreciating these nuances. And here is a body of knowledge which already has these nuances preserved and within its fold, offering everything, including the possible tools and techniques which you can use. So with these words, I can just hope that, we have been able to give at least a small peep into what this iceberg is. And probably we have not even touched the tip of the iceberg. Even the tip of the iceberg is a very, very huge task. So I thank you, Alma, and I'm really happy to see that. Now, I saw one of the publications which was sent over to me, and I saw that people in Japan, for instance, are looking as rebirth in the context of past birth, and they're into research about it. And I'm sure a whole lot of cultures and countries and civilizations are coming around once again to the same part. Even in India, you have a lot of knowledge which is coming about even from the scientific fold across the world. So let's hope that we can contribute on a daily basis to the furtherance of this knowledge. Thank you, Ma.
Yeah, and I really want to again thank you for the honor and for the time, and also again, being able to bring this whole vast system and this whole vast body of wisdom. Really, we've not even touched upon it, but what you said in the end was so beautiful that, with the Sri Yantras in the backdrop where you're sitting, to just give us a link between where quantum physics is today proving, through sonotrophy, or what is it called? They've done the whole experiments on sand, and they're able to see how sound is actually appearing in those subtle realms. And so through the physical body, we can say we have the mantras and the yantras and the chandas to lead us back into that, supra-conscious realm, and being able to access the cosmic knowledge and the vast systems. But again, one lifetime itself is too short, and this conversation is too short. I hope that next time we're able to have much more time with you. And I really hope and pray today that, with the blessings of Goddess, Devi Ma, as we call her fondly, in our Bharatiya Parampara, really wakes up the world to this tradition, and they really learn to give credit to Bharatiya traditions and paramparas for having kept everything intact, and for being able to disseminate those teachings as well in today's words, language, articulation, and through these mediums, which are again very short and encapsulated. But again, that's the only way to stay connected globally. And I hope that the world really recognizes, what Bharata has to offer. So again, thank you, Babaji.
Thank you, Ma. Thank you. Thank you to you and all the organizers. I wish you all the best. Namaste.
Namaste. Shivam Babaji. Shivam.